is the Nigerian person with the most awards, up to 1,000, including recognition by Time Magazine, Transparency International Award for Integrity, and so it goes. She even was awarded Man of the Year. But of all these capes, so to say, what mattered truly to my mother was the work, and that every day that she woke up, she got to safeguard the health and the well-being of not just one, not two, but hundreds of Nigerians, and even beyond the country. This was what mattered. And the awards, the cape, so to say, buoyed her efforts and just gave her that extra spring, because it took a lot, including assassination attempts and intimidations, but she kept going. And that love from the people really was fuel for that desire that she had to do the work on behalf of the people. To write it, you know, there's all these voices of fear, like, am I able to actually do this? Will I ever get this done? I'm that person that finishes a term paper 5 minutes before I have to hand it in. And so all these voices of fear. A lot of the work I support women to do is actually to face their fears. How I faced mine was to say, you know what? Even if I finish it at the age of 60, I'm still gonna get it done. So I was able to almost sort of like speak to all those voices around, like, discipline, time, commitment, effort, and say I give myself 40 plus years almost, you know, almost 40 years. And here we are, 4 years in, including time for interviews and writing. The book is real, and I think it's testament to not allowing your fear to get the better of you.
The title?
You can't really tell my mother what to do. So a few times, you know, we're like, are you sure, mommy? My father at one point shared, you know, your name is not Nafdak. You can't die for this place. But my mother was fully convinced that this was her life's calling, to do this work, to work for people. Having lost her sister at a young age, her sister was like a daughter to her, to fake insulin. So this is to say the work was extremely tasking, and naturally we worried for her and sometimes counseled her against pushing herself so hard. But, you know, that was where her heart, her spirit, all of her was committed to doing the opposite of sometimes what we wanted. And the results were clear. You know, I end the book. I was really grateful that I had a window to pen an afterword after the passing of my father. And in this afterword, I speak to the will of the people. We need to will our commitment, not only our commitment to community, but will a new and different reality. It's not enough to talk about what's broken anymore. It's not enough to bemoan what's broken. This is time for us to step in. And each person counts. This is the legacy, and this is the teaching of my mother. Remember, good people, great nation. With the rebranding campaign, she worked really hard to instill in us that knowing that we are each sort of like powerful parts of this nation, and we are good, and together we are great, and our coming together in all our parts is really a fundamental and important part of building up this community. But that active participation is... There's this BBC interview where my mom is, you know, heard talking about how she hires more women than men because she believes that women are less corruptible. And the anchor was a little bit scandalized, like, you can't say that. There's no difference between the sexes and what have you. And my mother stood her ground. This is not to agree or disagree, but to say this, she's someone not only who spoke very openly about her preference for women, or was very open about that, to a point of being controversial. You know, the feminism feels like a word that skipped her generation, but it does not mean that she didn't live it. And it's beautiful to see all the ways that she went out of her way to hire more women, have more representation, but beyond the hiring and the mentoring, she also created spaces within NAFDAC offices for childcare. Understand, especially imagine in Lagos, a mother waking up, 5 a.m. to leave home and miss traffic and get to work and get home at late at night. It just creates an impossible scenario to care for your kids. And this is not to say only mothers do that, but in general, especially in the Nigerian setting, that burden is heavily on women, and not to mention when you're lactating mother, etc. So she created a care centers within NAFDAC offices, and that's just was something that had not been done before, but she saw how important it was, herself a mother, but also someone who was extremely empathetic. And beyond this, you know, it's no surprise that the Women's Development Center in Anambra, in Agolo, is named after her, because she is someone that was, you know, from her grassroots growth started with the women's group in the village, galvanizing that group to build a medical clinic in the village. And they recognized her and promoted and held her up to become a local government, to work in the local government, and. So she started working with women all throughout her career, has empowered and upheld the potential and the power of women. And I am because you are because we are. Another way of putting it is, a person is only a person through other people. And at the core of this African humanist philosophy is the knowing that no one stands alone. We are all shaped not only by the environment around us, but by each other. Think of your best memories. Often you're not alone. There's always people, it's experiences, it's stories, and all of that is interdependent and interwoven into the greater tapestry. So everyone she came across influenced her, and vice versa. There's some core people that I explore in the story, like Ne, her great-grandmother, my great-grandmother, her grandmother, like her father, who was renowned in his village of Nanka, who was selfless and an extreme philanthropist, if you can use the word extreme in this case, but really a pioneer philanthropist. And so it goes. So they shaped her, she's shaped by them, and she's shaped by everybody that she meets, and vice versa. I guess I'm speaking to the interconnectedness of Ubuntu and us within a greater environment of people, places, and experiences, and all the ways that they shape us. And even in you reading the story, it shapes you and inspires something that I would never know, perhaps. And that's the beauty of life, and that's the beauty of stories. We get to step into each other's almost sort of thread and find our colors and our truth within it, and that can inspire our path as we move forward. Ubuntu, I am because we are. My creative journey as a writer is deeply shaped by a decade-long practice of morning pages, which is inspired by The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And the invitation has been to connect with my inner child, my artist self, my inner voice. And that relationship allows me to be true to my voice, because there's been dialogue over so many years and hours and weeks and months with this voice. And from there births everything, because our creativity is within. So in connecting with what's within, I can I can share the fullness of the richness of that. So for me, it's those that have invited me, and practices that have invited me to connect. And from there it becomes, well, tools and different ways that people have done that. But the core is my own true authentic voice and how I can let it shine. And honestly, at the core, the person that did that for me was, as I shared, Julie Cameron, Artist's Way. If you are looking to find your voice, I really recommend that read. She changed friends a lot over the course of her life. But at the core, she was a little bit of a lone wolf. Not in the way she worked, but almost, it's, you know how we can be introverts, but we show as extroverts. I feel in some way she was an introvert that showed and presented as an extrovert, because she refueled by being alone with herself, with her God, with prayer, and just sort of reading the paper, eating, like peeling an orange, peeling pineapple, peeling pawpaw. Almost her meditation was peeling fruits and just being with that act. And I think it took her back to a younger time, growing up in the village in simpler times. So many friends over the years, male, female, but at the end of the day, the constant was God. And that was the person that I could say God was the person she always leaned on. And her person that was also her pillar was most certainly my father. And she would rarely make a decision without reaching out to my father and asking his advice. My mother was someone who really did not believe in discriminating based on ethnic group and religion, on, gender, even though she had been discriminated against, and perhaps even because she was discriminated against. I think the Biafra War was a story of feeling the negative side effect, and that's to say the very least, of when we discriminate against one another and what that leads to ultimately. So I think that left in her this sort of sour taste of how the benefits are not there to be seen, not the way that she had experienced the benefits of community and working in unity and supporting each other and loving each other and showing up with compassion and trying to understand where another is coming from. And so it goes. And don't forget, she was born and spent the first decade of her life in Makurdi, very different from the southeast of Nigeria, right? So she already had that access to a diverse group of people from a young age, and then seeing how, when that is not honored, how that, the collapse of that in the war. And then beyond that, seeing also how Nigeria had supported so much of her education, given her scholarships at different points in her life, etc. So she's someone who had seen, in that spectrum, she saw what she valued and honored that. And she was known for that. She worked freely, and not just freely, successfully with people from across Nigeria. And that's what we need. You don't need someone who knows how to talk to Igbos and Yorubas and Tis and Efik. You need someone who can speak to people. Because at the end of the day, that's what we are. That's who we are. We're people. We're not our badges of identity as Christian, Muslim, Igbo, etc. We're people. We're brothers and sisters, even beyond the borders of the country. And honoring that is that essence of Ubuntu. I am because we are. And so if the person that is different from you, if they're not, you wouldn't be, right? By extension, it's that invitation to know that we are shaped by everyone and everything around us. So how we hold each other becomes even more important. And she embodied that fully in her life. I start the book sharing how A friend told me that I couldn't write this story of my mother without myself becoming a mother first. Incidentally, I went through a loss of a pregnancy, 2 actually, and in some ways that activated a big part of telling her story, because I realized that I was being called to sharing the fullness of a woman's story. And in that way, my journey as a mother, including to children that are not physically here with me and to my daughter, is intertwined with the story, because each step was feeling into my own truth of life and pain and joy and everything that forms me, that comes from my mother, that formed her, that comes from those that came before. And in many ways it speaks to this title of I Am Because We Are. Everything is intertwined. You can't remove one piece and the other stands. So absolutely it's part and parcel of the story.
Not all heroes wear capes, but your mother wore a lot of capes. Mostly those that were bestowed on her.
You know, some people, when faced with death threats or a bullet literally grazing their scalp, they would say, oh yeah, no, okay, we're done. Not my mother. It did the opposite. It galvanized her. Each threat showed her that she was doing something right. And that frustrated those that were intimidating or trying to intimidate her, even kill her, because it just didn't work. And before that, the bribery and the attempts at luring her with money and trinkets had failed. So they really were left at sort of not knowing what else to do, but perhaps comply and work by the book. And that's why we saw 80% reduction in fake drugs, etc. in the country, because ultimately they knew that the only way to be successful was to do things the right way. My God is my mother's personal person. She loved God. And we grew up saying our novenas, our rosary, 30-day novena, mass, name it. So how can that not influence you? You know, so many hours of my childhood is spent in deep communion with God, and. So I would say beyond the religion itself, the values, I think, is what really, I think is emphasized for me. Because, you know, you could go to church for all you want, but if you don't instill in your life the values that of love, of charity, of honesty, of compassion, then it's all for naught. And her life was constantly to lean on the wisdom of God and step into the truth that was required of her as a Christian, as a mother, as a sister, as a friend, to be true to her role in supporting people around her in her community and not failing to do her part always wherever she could to the best of her ability. And it goes without saying, being honest in everything she did. The invitation is for all of us to take after her. We are in an era that everyone's courage is needed. We can't play small in our different corners, because there's courage in all of us. And her courage is founded on integrity, right? It's like she dug deep and thought, this is the right thing to do. And it might be hard, but the right thing is always the right thing to do, right? The truth is always right. And that's what she trusted. And the invitation to all of us is to trust that. And truth is beyond the words that you speak. What do you feel as your truth? And how can we step into that in a way that takes immense courage? This invitation goes beyond speaking up. It could be in your life, in the thing that you want to do and is calling to you to find that courage. So I trust that this book is sharing the legacy and the invitation of finding courage, connecting to courage, being true to courage, and what happens when you are. Her driving force was always the people, Nigerians. And you know, my mother, since we were little, she would take us to you know, lepers colony, to hospitals, to different centers that needed a little extra help, a little support, a little love, to instill in us that need to support those in need, to support community. And that's something she did consciously. So when given this platform, NAFDAC, the ministry, she went above and beyond to serve the people. That's what drove her. That's what got her out of bed. How can I better the life of one person today, let alone 1,000? Imagine that drive for a person like that.